So we've got two readings, and both are prayers. First one's a prayer by Hannah, and the second is what we consider to be a song by Mary. First one is from 1 Samuel 2, verses 1 to 10. Then Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance. For the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundation of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord will be broken. The Most High will thunder from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. And our second reading is from Luke 1, 39 to 58. Excuse me, when Mary visits Elizabeth. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leapt for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her." And Mary said, "My soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Saviour, for he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is his name. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. He has performed mighty deeds with his arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down the rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, just as he promised our ancestors." Mary stayed with Elizabeth for about 3 months and then returned home. When it was time for Elizabeth to have her baby, she gave birth to a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown her great mercy, and they shared her joy. This is the word of the Lord.
It's amazing and very joy-filled to be here and to be back. I'm aware that 3 weeks ago I was here and you were praying for me to go to South Sudan, and now I'm back, so I'm very grateful about that. It's also an incredible privilege to be talking about joy at Christmas, and as I've been travelling over the last few weeks, it's given me a good excuse to listen to lots of very joy-filled carols and think about joy a lot, so I'm grateful in many ways. Today, I want to speak about how joy is not just an emotion. It is a positive emotion, but joy in Jesus and the joy that Mary was experiencing, the joy that Hannah was experiencing, was something much more. It was not just an emotion in the moment, but it was a gift of the Spirit and a glimpse of God's kingdom and his kingship. And I just really pray for us today and for this season of Christmas that that's what joy will be for us. Something way more than the joy of the moment, but a glimpse of God's kingdom and God's kingship. So I'm going to talk about joy, obviously, but just again to thank you for your prayers over the last few weeks. I've been in South Sudan, but I'm also working with a team of South Sudanese and Sudanese researchers. So I've been meeting with people from Sudan and South Sudan and working with them. And it's a really tough time at the moment. So in February this year, the South Sudanese government started bombing again. So kind of war is continuing and escalating. And in Sudan, there is full-scale war. And I'll talk more about that towards the end of this talk. Also, thank you to Barbara, I don't know if she's here, for making me the most amazing cake when I got back this week for my birthday coming up, and for Lisa for delivering it. So lots of thanks are due. And this is if we're thinking about joyful moments in my week, this was a very joyful moment when this appeared at my doorstep. It's very nice. And I mean, I'm afraid way more of it is now eaten than in that picture. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about that joy is joy as Jesus' joy in the Bible is a way deeper and bigger experience than the kind of Disney version of joy. That this is a joy for the world's joy. And it is joy is a fruit of faith. And that will give me an opportunity to talk a bit about some of my stories from Sudan. So joy is bigger than a Disney joy. It's a joy for the world. And joy is a fruit of faith. So we start with this kind of emotion of joy. Joy is clearly very, we have that feeling of it, right? It's somehow like happiness. It's somehow like excitement. And if we think of Mary's song, if we think of Luke 1 and the beginning of Luke's story, Luke is trying to share and kind of testify and write a history of Jesus' coming to earth. And he opens the book with these accounts of what was happening before Jesus was born. But to be honest, if you look at it, it's a bit like a musical. There are songs everywhere. There's Mary's song, then there's Zechariah's song. These people who have encountered God, who have met with angels, who are at the beginning of Jesus' story, just can't keep it in. They are bursting with song. And in many ways, that seems like a kind of very joyous experience, right? Just that we cannot keep it in. It is just flowing out of us. And in many ways, songs are a very good way to remember. It's interesting that Luke starts his Gospels not with kind of accounts from interviews, but with these recorded word-for-word songs. And so in the Sudans, actually, a lot of culture is oral. In biblical times, obviously, many people could write, but many people couldn't. And a good way to remember things is through music, is through song. So I'm sure if I have a son called Jonathan, he's 10 years old. If I go to him now and ask him about the details of any book he's read, he might remember vaguely, but not word for word. But if I ask him to sing the songs from Wicked, he can sing them word perfect. And if I try and sing them, he will correct me. And that's what often happens in oral cultures. You get songs, and if people sing them, and if they get them wrong, they're corrected, and they get passed down through generations. So these songs were an expression of amazing joy and emotion, but they were also a way for things to be remembered. And that's why Luke records them. But these are moments of pure joy. So in verse 47, Mary sings, "And my spirit rejoices in God, my Saviour." This kind of Greek word, agaleao, I think, talks about intense, almost uncontrollable joy, like leaping and jumping for gladness, an outward expression of inner delight. She was leaping with joy, just like Elizabeth. When Elizabeth saw Mary, she felt John inside her leap for joy in her womb. Mary's also using language that's very kind of emotional and passionate and about leaping for joy. So I don't know if you know this character that's also appearing on my slides. So you had Mary, but you also had this character of joy. So if any of you watched Disney, you might not, you might. There's a film called Inside Out, and I think it's quite a good film. It's about the emotions. It's about kind of a young child's kind of psychology and her inner experiences of these competing emotions. And joy is a big character in it. And in some ways, joy in the Disney film is like Mary's experience of joy. So joy in the film is described as an unstoppable spirit, an unbeatable energy. Joy brings a smile to your face. And who cares? Let's party. She just wants to jump. She wants to sing. And in many ways, Mary's song feels like that. Often I wonder how she sung it. It is, the way it's been put to music over time is incredibly beautiful. But I wonder, what was the tone? What was the rhythm? What was the kind of joy in that song when she sang it? However, I don't think I agree with all of Disney's understanding of joy. So it goes on to say, joy is when everything in your life is going your way. That is when joy takes control. And I think that's exactly not what a biblical understanding of joy is. Joy is something different to that. It's not just about the circumstances of the moment being right. It's not just about happiness. C.S. Lewis writes quite assertively against this idea that joy is just happiness, that it's just an emotion of the moment. C.S. Lewis describes joy as more like a memory of a memory. It's not about whether things are going well or things are going badly. This Christmas, I don't know where you are at, whether you are looking forward to the joy or whether you are fearing it because people are missing or because you don't think you'll be organized on time or because you fear being lonely. But C.S. Lewis says that is not what joy is about. It's not about the right circumstances of the right moment. In fact, it's a different kind of emotion often. He talks about it being like a bliss, like the bliss of Eden. He uses kind of Milton's language. But for him, it is this kind of memory of a memory, and we get lots of those things at Christmas. So this is one of my, I don't know what your kind of nostalgic memories are at Christmas time, things that appear all of a sudden that remind you of something deep within you, a joy that's not just a happiness for that second, but that goes back maybe over the years or the generations. So these are some of my triggers, sometimes that bring me the most joy at Christmas time. So when we got the tree out this week a bit late, Jonathan waited patiently because I was in Sudan. And these are two of the baubles that sometimes trigger that real joy inside me. So the smaller one is the one from when Jonathan, his first Christmas. But the other one is the one that triggers deeper emotions in me because it's the one from my first Christmas, which I really can't remember. But I remember childhood days of hanging that bauble on the tree. I also have these memories, this strange thing at Christmas of driving home for Christmas and having that song, Driving Home for Christmas, on in the car. Because the first time I really worked and lived away from home, I lived in Berkshire at this school, Wellington College, and at the end of term, just driving home for Christmas filled me with that strong sense of joy of, I've survived a term and now I get to go home and rest. And these are a deeper sense of joy because they bring up these histories and these memories within us, but they're fleeting, and that's what C.S. Lewis wanted to highlight. They come and they go. They are not about a long-term moment of the circumstances being right, but they come and they go, and as soon as we grasp them, they have left us. They are like a visitation. And maybe that's what joy is really about. It is about a visitation that points us to the future, a small glimpse of what we will get fully one day. Psalm 16 talks about, "You shall show me the path of life. In your presence is the fullness of joy, and at your right hand there is pleasure forevermore." Eventually, we will be in his presence and we will get that fullness of joy, but not yet. And Mary's song is all about that. It's about a longer sense of joy, a deeper history, not just back to our childhoods, not just back to our first jobs, but it evokes a history of God, a deep, long history that goes back thousands of years. The joy of the moment and the joy of Mary as Jesus is growing inside her is evoking thousands of years of God's plan for his people. So the whole of Luke 1 is set in this kind of remembering of those Old Testament characters, of a history of God and his people. Zechariah and Elizabeth, they are an old barren couple. So much of the old stories of the Old Testament start with old barren couples, whether it's Abraham and Sarah, whether it's Isaac and Rebekah. They should have known they're an old barren couple, they're a godly people, old barren couple. God is about to do something big. And you see that later in Zechariah's song, so come tonight to hear from Rob. But Zechariah just overflows as he sings with emotion, as he sings because he's got a son, John. He's quoting so much of the Old Testament. Gosh, he knows his Old Testament. He knows his scriptures well. He quotes from Exodus, Psalms, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Malachi, and Jeremiah. He is flowing with saying this joy of Jesus is rooted in a much longer history. But if we go to Mary's song that Lisa kindly read for us, Mary's song is evoking a different moment in the Old Testament. It's evoking Hannah's story, again, a woman who was barren, who had longed for a son, who was praying year after year, who prayed to God and said, if I have a son, I will give my son to you. And eventually God does give her Samuel. This is 1,000 years, over 1,000 years before Jesus is born. But God would give Hannah Samuel, and Samuel would be given to God, and Samuel would grow up in a priestly context, but he would also become a prophet, and he would be a prophet that would be a prophet for the people of God, but that would be a prophet that would anoint the first king of Israel and eventually anoint King David. He was a priest and a prophet and an anointer of a king. And as Mary evokes Hannah's song, she is not only carrying someone who will be a priest and a prophet, but who will also be that next Messiah king. Jesus is coming as the anointed one. But throughout these two passages, I suspect you heard it as Lisa read it, but you can hear the similarities in them. So in Hannah's song, she says, my heart rejoices, literally jumps for joy in the Lord. And in Mary's, it says, my soul glorifies the Lord and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. They are both songs of joy. Hannah goes on to say, do not keep talking so proudly or let your mouth speak arrogance. And again, Mary speaks against the proud. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. And Mary would have known Hannah's song. She's evoking it, but not blindly. She knows. Hannah talks about how the bows of the warriors will be broken and how those who stumbled are armed with strength. So those who are high up will be brought low, and those who are already stumbling will instead be given strength. Mary says he has brought down the rulers from their thrones, and he's lifted up the humiliated. The rulers again will come down, and the humiliated will be lifted up. So many similarities. Hannah says those who are full hire themselves out for food. So those who have so much food will have no food left that they will have to hire out their labor to get food. But those who are now hungry are hungry no more. And Mary also says those who are filled, he has filled the hungry with good things. He has sent the rich away empty. These songs are clearly in parallel. Mary knows what she's doing. And this is also a song of upside-downness. Things that were powerful, things that were rich, things that had plenty will change. That was Samuel's coming. He was coming to anoint kings that would bring a new kingdom on earth. But actually, the long kingdom, the kingdom that would reign forever, would come with Jesus through Mary's child and Jesus' birth. The end of Mary's song, Hannah's song says, he will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Hannah is predicting that her son will anoint a king, that a king will come. But it's Mary's son that will be that king, that will be the anointed one. that will come even though he put stars into space, will come to earth, be born in a stable, not in a mighty palace, but will be born amongst us. And Samuel is sent to change the way that God's people will be governed. And Jesus is sent to change the way God's people will be governed too. That the glory of God and the presence of God and our experience of joy will no longer be contained within a temple, but that will be released, that we will be able to experience his joy anywhere through the coming of his Spirit. We will know the fruit of his Spirit. And the fruit of his Spirit will be love, joy, and peace. That we will be given that. That we will experience his presence, not just after death and in heaven, but now on earth. But there is something else to say and important about Hannah and Mary's song. These women are both expecting children. They know they are gifts from God. And I don't know if you know people who have recently expected young babies, but what songs do they sing to their babies? So nowadays, everyone's encouraged to sing to your baby because they can hear you and they learn to recognize your voice when they're still in the womb. So you're told to sing to them. So what do you sing? And I think most people probably sing lullabies. They think, I want my child to be quiet. I don't want it to kick me all day long. Let me sing something nice and quiet to them. Maybe I'll sing blessings over them. Maybe I'll sing about teddy bears and shutting the curtains. That is a normal song to sing to a baby in a womb. Or maybe if you realize your baby is the king, in Mary's case, she knew this was a special child. Maybe instead you should sing songs of glory. You should sing national anthems. You should, sing of the flag raising high and the glory days coming. But neither Hannah nor Mary sing about lullabies or about the glory days or expanding kingdoms. Instead, they sing about the strong becoming humble and the humble becoming strong. They sing about the hungry becoming fed and the overfed becoming hungry. They sing about an upside-down vision of the world, a world that will switch things back to front. They don't sing about lullabies. They don't sing about glory. They sing about a different vision of God's kingdom. And that's where joy must be found. In that presence of God, but that upside-down presence of God, where everything is switched around. So in South Sudan, we see that. We see joy in moments when, and Sudan as well, see joy in moments when joy really shouldn't be there. If it's based on the circumstances of the world, there is no joy to be had in the Sudans. As many of you know, I've been working in the Sudans for close to 15 years now. But the Sudans have had decades of armed conflict and famine. So South Sudan has been at war almost constantly for 40 years. The Sudan had a bit of a break, but in the last 3-4 years, they've gone back to war. And it is devastating. Millions of people have been killed, and people grow up in this fear. At the moment now in the Sudan, 4 million people are on the edge of starvation. Hundreds of thousands have already tipped into starvation, which means people will be dying of hunger. In South Sudan, I was meeting with people who say they have to sleep outside at night because they fear aerial bombardment, and because if the bombs come at night, you have to run fast. You don't even have time to get outside your front door. Even though they live in small one-roomed huts, that's too slow. They need to sleep outside so that when they hear planes overhead, they can run fast so their bombs don't get them. These are not circumstances where joy should be. But there is joy. A lot of the people I work with and the Christians I know still find a place to have joy because they have hope in something more. So this time I spent quite a lot of time in these protection of civilian sites. They're basically like kind of refugee camps surrounded by UN peacekeepers, and they're kind of guarded to keep them safe because they are worried they'll be persecuted and attacked by government. These are really, really difficult places, up to kind of 100,000 people sometimes in these very kind of makeshift urban centres. They've recently had aid cuts, as you might have heard on the news, so they are getting like water deliveries one time a week. They're not getting enough food. They're heavily reliant on people kind of helping them from outside if they have relatives that can do that. So they're in a really desperate situation. But they do what they can to bring joy in their life and to remember the good things. So they plant trees, as you can see here. They do this incredible embroidery, this is really kind of a sign of like home, that you do this embroidery on this bedding. And people paint their walls for Christmas. So not so many Christmas trees or lights in this context, but what they have is mud walls, and they can either use charcoal, or they burn tires, or they get the black out of old batteries, which sounds incredibly dangerous to me, but they do it anyway because they want this deep black colour. And they're painting their walls for Christmas. So this is kind of a starry night, apparently, and the white is meant to be kind of light. And this is another painting that was done of kind of candles on an altar for Christmas. But also just very grateful people. So I had a moment, I went to a church, and there was someone there who was they'd kind of collected honey and they were selling honey. So it was a lovely story, and he was a disabled man, and he got all this honey. So I thought, I'll buy some. And then after church that day, I was like, oh gosh, now I've got this massive container of honey, but what am I going to do with it? I'm only here for a few weeks. There's only so much honey I can eat, and I can't bring it back to the UK. I don't want to get in trouble with customs for the sake of honey. So I thought, gosh, what am I going to do with it? And then the next day, I was going back to these protection of civilian sites. So I just took it with me, and I felt, God, I would just give it to the researcher you're working with. Apparently her children had been nagging her for honey for weeks and weeks. And so it was a real kind of, it was a blessing that she was so grateful for it. It was a blessing to me more than to her, I'm sure. But there was a little kind of gift of honey. Some other stories, though, when we were there, something pretty sad happened further up where we've been working. So just over the border into northern Sudan is an area called the Nuba Mountains. And it's had war and decades of war. War broke out against Seville in 2011. Then there were a few years of peace. And we were up there in May, actually, and Kate Brankin, for those of you who know her, has been up there very recently. While I was in Juba, there was a drone strike in an area that hasn't been struck for a very long time. And the problem with drone strikes is they are the worst form of aerial bombardment, so because they can target and kill if they want to. So they killed 48 children who were outside a school on a parade. It's just, I mean, this isn't the drone. This is a bomb. It would be much less accurate. In fact, that one hasn't exploded. So it's horrendous. And I have colleagues on the ground, and they're safe. But just that sense of, like, it started again, like just before Christmas, but that this war has come again after a few years of it being on front lines a bit far away. Now it's back in the villages, it's back in the schools, and when war has come. But Najwa, who is a friend, and she started in the 90s a small charity in the area. She's from the area. She runs this women's organization there. But I saw her, and it amazed me. Like she was clearly very shaken by the drone attack, and it was hard for her to talk about it, but she was still trying to find joy. So some of her children weren't living in the Nuba Mountains at the time for safety. So before she came back from the Nuba Mountains, she gathered up about 100 kilograms of pumpkins in order that she could bring this food back to them and give them a taste of the Nuba Mountains for Christmas. But just these small attempts to find joy in these really difficult places. Another story is of some women we've been working with in Juba. So this is the last story. So this woman is called Viola, and I met her last in 2024. But last Christmas, around this time, her son died, and he was young, and he died of malnutrition. He died because He'd just not had enough food over time, and by the time there was medical intervention, it was too late. But she felt joyful this year because she has a new son, so he's her kind of hope for the future. But in this kind of story of women celebrating, of Mary and Hannah celebrating because of children, it's really been a bit of a journey for me this year to be working with these mothers and in this malnutrition clinic where women just are struggling to feed their children. So in South Sudan, the norm is to eat a meal a day and nothing more. So it's not a time of hunger if you're eating a meal a day. It's a time of hunger if you're going for 2 or 3 days without eating. But the problem is when you have young children, it seems that they struggle to eat just a meal a day. Their bodies are not designed for that kind of food intake. They need smaller amounts over time. And therefore, when a meal a day is the norm, it's like a lot of little children get very, very sick. And the clinic we've been working in, a child dies every day. So it's just a kind of common thing, an awful thing, that these children are not surviving that hunger. But despite it all, there is hope. Viola has another child. We spoke to one mum, and she had been saving by working and doing small amounts in a restaurant, like a local restaurant, not a big restaurant. She was saving about 20p a day. And she knew that once she got about £50 worth, she could take her whole family back to the village. But she was keeping working despite the hardship, despite the lack of circumstances. She had hope and she had joy. So I don't know what your Christmases will be like. I'm sure they'll be very different from those in Sudan. I don't know if they will be happy. I hope they will be happy. But what I pray for is that they will be full of joy. A joy that involves a vision of God's history that is much bigger than the moment of your Christmas dinner or your Christmas afternoon. A joy that is based on God having a long history, that he prophesied Jesus coming, that he knew he would come, that he was born to a virgin, and that he still loves us and that he is with us. And one of his gifts of the Spirit is joy for us and for people in Sudan. I'll leave it there.